E4C. Originally was the Edmonton City Center Corporation. And then now it's E4C, and those four C's stand for compassion, commitment, courage, cabbage, what? So, anyways, here, so as you can see, it's been around Edmonton for about 40 years, and there's many different things that we do. You know, the Women's Emergency Accommodation Center, where Daniel, that's run by E4C, the Inner City Youth Housing Project that was just spoken about. That's an E4C project now, and it came on board with us. We've got food security with the school lunch programs, and of course, and community gardens, and all sorts of things. Check out our website, e4c.org, not selling anything, just check it out. And but lots of different social programs to help eliminate poverty. And of course, housing is a big part of that. And we have many different types of housing, and we're going to talk about that today. But I'm not going to.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Daniel Johnson. I'm the assistant manager at the Women's Emergency Accommodation Center. I'm also a researcher. I have a PhD from the University of Alberta, and I teach courses in the Community Service Learning program there. So it's great to see CSL as a component of the conference here. I also wanted to say, just because I think we can't say this enough, to acknowledge that we're meeting here on Treaty 6 territory, that it's an honor to have a conversation like this as treaty people. I wanted to talk just for a few minutes about the Women's Emergency Accommodation Center, or WEAC, particularly focusing just on some of the challenges that we're seeing on the ground at the present time. So WEAC has been around for about 40 years and has provided shelter, food and support to women 18 and over who don't have children with them. And we're a 24/7 shelter, so once a woman has a bed at the shelter, as long as she's back by midnight on that particular night, she maintains her bed, so we don't ask people to leave at 6 in the morning like the MAT program shelters. Providing food and support is huge. In the month of May, we served over 3,500 meals and bagged lunches for women who often work in the day. So we're really proud that we are able to offer nourishment as well. We accommodate 66 women nightly, daily in beds. We serve probably some of the most vulnerable and marginalized people in Edmonton, but also I think the strongest and some of the most resilient individuals that I've ever met. On any given night, about 50%, about half of the residents at WEAC are Indigenous women. I like to say that that's a disproportionate percentage, not an over-representation. I think if we say over-representation, it implies that there would be some acceptable level of representation. Of course, that isn't correct. And to note that these are women who are displaced most often in their own territories. So we're working with people who have been dispossessed of their land, this land right here where we are, and are now accessing emergency services. So just to talk a little bit about some recent trends that we're noticing. So just last month, in the month of May, as usual, our occupancy rate was 99%. I think in the month of January, we were at 102 or 103% occupancy. So women sleeping on the couch, on the floor, just trying to accommodate as many people as we can. We served 108 individual clients in May. We had to turn away 317 women just last month. So it speaks to that there's a really low turnover because residents are making it back in time for curfew to maintain their bed because they don't have any other place to go. So the fact that we're turning away over 300 people in a month, I think, really speaks to the need for more services for women in the city. Anecdotally, we hear from residents at WEAC that they would prefer to stay outside, to walk the streets during the night, stay in coffee shops as they can, or stay in really precarious housing or unsafe housing situations than stay on MAT programs. We're really proud of WEAC that everybody sleeps in a bed for the most part. I think a couple reasons for avoiding the MAP programs would be safety. So there are, of course, a large number of men accessing the MAP programs as well, so the chance of running into a partner or somebody who they're trying to avoid. Just overall safety. And also often transgender women have been misgendered in the MAP program, so women being asked to stay on the men's side. And so I think another thing that we're really proud of at WEAC is that we've long been a safe place for transgender women, and that we accept women who identify as women. On an average night in May, 12 out of 66 residents were over the age of 55. So we're seeing increasingly more seniors at the emergency shelter, especially seniors being discharged from hospital. So when we have a social worker from one of the hospitals calling and asking if they could send over a 69, 75-year-old woman who's just had surgery and has no place to go, that seems to be happening increasingly. The length of stay is growing for many residents, so we have residents who are staying for multiple months, a year plus. And these are residents who are actually on waiting lists for housing programs. I was talking with our placement coordinator who does our housing referrals. She said that some of the referrals she's doing are to waiting lists that are 3 to 5 years for subsidized housing. That residents at WEAC are waiting months to even have their intake interview for Housing First programs. She also pointed out something that we sort of see as a challenge right now is that we have a number of women who score higher, who score really high on the SPDAT, on the assessment tool for Housing First. So they're too high for Housing First program, but they're too independent for assisted living. So we're finding them living on the streets. Often we're not even able to meet their needs at the emergency shelter. How to address that gap? Those people often fall through the cracks. So they're too independent for assisted living, but they score too high for even intensive case management. I think one other thing to point out would be, as Mr. Shapcott mentioned last night, that the housing allowance through Alberta Works doesn't match actual housing costs. So someone on Alberta Works receives $323 a month toward their housing. I don't know where you find an apartment for just over $300 in Edmonton. WEAC residents aren't eligible for shelter or basic needs allowance because Human Services funds us as well. So when women come to stay at WEAC, their benefits are often cut off completely. If we're lucky, we can advocate for them to receive a bus pass if we can prove that they have enough medical appointments that month. I've worked with a woman who had part of her tongue removed because of cancer and sat with her in Alberta Works, and the worker said that she didn't have enough medical appointments or high enough medical needs to be worthy of a bus pass. We've noticed in the past couple months that Alberta Works are starting to send letters and phone residents in the shelter saying, we found out that you're there, we're closing your file. And what that can mean is taking away their prescription coverage. So then we have women who are no longer able to access, pretty much 95% of people who stay at the shelter are on a broad array of prescription medication. So then they're not able to access that. I think one more thing, also just a trend in our neighborhood, we're seeing more and more IV drug use. There is a Hyatt hotel that's being built just kitty corner to our shelter, and I have to think that there's some link between the anxiety that women at the shelter are feeling in terms of gentrification in our neighborhood and this increase in IV drug use. But I've talked with other colleagues who are noticing similar things throughout the city. So things that I could say that we need, there definitely needs to be much more culturally relevant, I think especially for Indigenous women, culturally relevant programming and also housing options, as well as the need for more supportive housing options, so options that offer support in the long term. Thank you.
I'm just going to do a real quick, hopefully quick overview of introduction to housing first, because we talked about that, and I don't know if you probably will teach me about it, but there's maybe people that aren't so familiar with what housing first is. So the traditional model of addressing homelessness is you got to deal with your stuff before we're going to grant you the gift of housing. And I don't know about you, but if I didn't have a place to live, I don't know that I'd be able to make appointments. I don't know that I'd be able to go and address all those things, and I didn't have a place even to pee in the morning. So it was before we would go, they have to be housing ready. It wasn't seen that housing was right. They have to be ready for that housing before it's granted. It's a horrible term. And the approach is really problem-focused and focused on the person's barriers. And again, some people have been able to kind of say they kind of get their stuff dealt with and then get to those programs. For some people, it can work, but for many people who are chronically homeless, it's just not a reality that we can't. When there's no stability in their life, no place to lay their head, how can they be expected to deal with these very deep barriers, these complex issues, these traumas, all sorts of things? So a new model is needed. So this is rockstar Samson Barris. He's the guy who invented housing first, or came up with the idea of coined it. And he says, some people think that when you give housing away, that you're actually enabling people, as opposed to helping them get better. Our experience has been that the offer of housing first and then treatment actually has more effective results in reducing addiction and mental health symptoms than trying to do it the other way. The other way works for some people, but it hasn't worked for people who are chronically homeless. So the housing first approach, it says that housing is a right. And so we're going to be solution focused, focus on their strengths. We're going to accept that people can't address some of these things until they have that stable housing. This is Sam's picture, and so he showed how it's actually cheaper to give somebody housing and then work with something than to have them keep accessing the emergency medical services. So somebody who's on the street is always using hospitals, and they're getting picked, they're getting arrested for nuisance things, and they're just costing taxpayers a lot of money when they're on the street, because that's the way they can access services, by being in the psychiatric hospital, an emergency room, or in jail, or in the local shelter even. I remember one time I had a social worker at the Royal Alice Hospital call me, and she was trying to pressure me to get somebody out of the hospital and come into our Housing First program, but at that time we weren't able to help them. And she was kind of almost yelling on the phone saying, "Don't you know that this is costing $1,500 a night?" And I'm like, wow, we can pay rent for that. So giving somebody housing is not a handout, it's a cost savings. And that's the selling feature of Housing First. And of course, as you know then, these lovely plans came in. We're so happy about them. And Homer Trust is the funder of the Housing First programs in Edmonton. But there are other, Housing First is a concept that is executed differently in different places. And so Homer Trust is the body that kind of tells all of the different agencies in Edmonton that do Housing First how they're going to operate it. But there's other cities in Edmonton, or in Alberta, that are doing Housing First programs. And they get together and are connected and share what best practices are going on in those communities. So that's that 5-year progress of that wonderful time. Should I say it again? And I'm just going to move on though. So we've got a lot going on. So these are the Housing First teams of Edmonton right now. So YMCA has one, Bissell, Boyle Street, Mission, Just Place Health and Wellness, Bednar, and of course E4C. We have 2 Housing First teams. One though is a Bradbury housing team. So there's an intensive case management team, and that's the team that puts somebody in a house and provides supports for up to a year. There's a Bradbury housing team that will put somebody in a house and provide supports for 6 months. And then there's also a different type of team for those people that do have higher acuity, that have maybe more barriers. And we have 2 of them. There's Pathways to Housing for Boyle Macaulay, and Diversity Housing. And they will have people, they have on their teams, they're different than my team, in that they have mental health professionals who are on their team who will go into the client's home to provide supports. Housing First agencies have certain standards of practice, and some main ones I want to point out are client choice is a huge part of Housing First. That we don't just put people in homes. We say, hey, here's some places, so based on your preference and based on the money we got, the money you got, where do you want to live? And that's a huge part of the success. It's just basic dignity, showing that people will stay in their homes when they get a choice in it. Where do they want to stay? What neighborhood they want to stay? What place, they want to live in. So client choice of being client-centered is what we really definitely strive for. Also, I want to mention that the Housing First programs at Edmonton are a harm reduction program. Somebody doesn't have to go through all that treatment first. They can still be using this and still, be engaged in some high-risk activity. But are they going to be good neighbors and pay their rent? Then come on in. My team particularly is currently serving 140 women and 118 children. And so our teams consist of housing outreach workers that go and find those apartments, talk to landlords, and also provide landlord support. And then help those people get in. And then they have a follow-up support worker who works for them, again, with the rapid rehousing program for 6 months, intensive case management, 1 year plus. It's supposed to be 1 year to 18 months. That's the hope. Though I'll tell you that somebody who's been homeless for 20 years, you think that they're going to kind of get connected to all supports and have it all figured out by then. Good luck. Right now, our team takes referrals through E4C agencies, so people from WEAC can come into our program. But then there's just we can't provide. We don't have enough spaces in our program, as we're all discovering. So I talked about the type. These are the types of supports. So Housing First provides suitable housing. So again, we're not just going to put people in slummy areas because that's where the rents are low. So what's the neighborhood you want to be in? What's suitable for the needs of your family? What school does your kid go to? Okay, let's try and get you a place around there. We try to actually go, what's best for your life? And but we also do have a budget, and so we got to try and find something that works within our budget and their budget as well. We pay the security deposit, first month's rent, and first year tenant insurance. We help them set up their utilities. We provide assistance on move-in day. They get some furniture from Fine Furnishing Home, the furniture bank. They get starter packs for groceries. They get a rental subsidy. That's key. And then they get regular follow-up support in home and community for 1 year. And also the landlord does get some support as well if there's any concerns. And then a big, huge part of that follow support is connection to support our community. Our workers are resource brokers. So we got to find resources. They got to get people to a family doctor, mental health supports, addictions, all the things they need. We got to get them connected to, because those are the things that have been barriers to housing for them, maybe in the past, and financial supports too. Maybe maybe got moms who haven't done their taxes, so they can't get their child tax benefit. We got to get that going, right? This is the success as a part of Housing First. If we can get people connected to community resources, we're supposed to be a short-term intervention, 1 year, 18 months, and then when they're out and they're connected. But it's different. So you know all about NIMBY, not my backyard. So I just want to talk now a little bit about the challenges that we face in Housing First. Housing First is awesome. I love Housing First. But it's not the be-all and the end-all of everything. Now I'm just going to take off my glasses. Now I'm Superman. So there are some times that Housing First is not right for people coming in. Just as Daniel was saying, there's people that we have that aren't going to be able to go into Housing First. Their needs are too high. They're not going to be able to just live in market housing across the city. So we need to make sure that Housing First isn't seen as the golden child necessarily. We need to have a whole, as Michael was saying last night, the whole spectrum of housing options for people. We have people who, just cannot, in the market system, on their own follow the conditions of the lease, or their income source getting pulled from them. We can't have them living there. And they can't stay in our program for a long period of time if they don't have an income or can't follow the conditions of the lease. So we need more housing options. We do have a lot of people, just like there's a lot of people staying at WEAC for a long period of time. There's a lot of people that are going past that 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in Housing First, because they wouldn't fit into permanent supportive housing. They wouldn't have high enough needs, but they can't really do it without some supports. So we also have to have better support options. You've heard the phrase many times now, Housing First, not housing only. And the whole point is we're supposed to be the short-term intervention. But if we don't get them connected to community supports, then they're going to be at risk of homelessness again. And there's just not enough community supports out there. There's excellent supports that are out there, but you know, you've called around, there's waiting lists, there's conditions, things like that. So we need to have more options out there for mental health and more addiction supports. Also, we need more trauma-informed supports. We need a lot of people out there. Again, I've had people say, income support workers. I don't mean you're not dissing on income support workers. It's a hard job. But people said, my worker says that my income's going to get cut off if I don't go to treatment. And then they have to go back for that person saying, well, if they get their income cut off, they're going to lose their housing. So please continue. You know, we have to beg them. Please continue the income. And it's frustrating. Or you know, people just going. I had a worker just the other day say to me, well, I'm not going to give her that income because she called me up. I'm not going to say what it is. And I think people will understand that these people are under stress, that just being homeless is a trauma. And we need people to understand it in the community and different organizations that provide support, so they're not so quick to turn people away when they're different or when they're hurt or sick or upset. And that goes into the attitude, of course. We have to be fighting this not my backyard idea. We need landlords to say, hey, it's okay to come into my place. But we have landlords that know they say how come they're in the program, and they start asking questions that they'd never ask anyone else. They start going, so how addicted are you? Or what's your drugs that you're using? Why are you in this program? It's so inhumane. It's so horrible. And then they try to do things really well. We would say, I'll rent to this person as long as you're in their life for the rest of their lives, you know, for all the time that they're with us. And it's like, that ain't gonna happen, you know? And we have to sometimes tell landlords that our involvement with the client, you know, this is just a good faith agreement. They could go into contract with the client. They're still under the Residential Tenancies Act, just because they're clients in the program. They can't just walk in and enter into a client's home anytime they want. They can't just, I get phone calls sometimes, the landlord saying, you know, so-and-so had a guest over. I'm like, they're allowed, it's their home. It can have a guest. But there's still these attitudes that people should not have the same rights and dignity as other people. So we're doing good things. We are doing excellent things. But there's always more that can be done. And again, if we can change the attitudes of people in the community, get the funding we need for the supports that we need, and have that range of options, we'll be doing good.
I'm program manager at McCall Apartments. I work in the Housing and Mental Health Division at E4C, and we run a number of different permanent supportive housing programs. And we also run a number of affordable housing sites. I'm just going to skip ahead here. Essentially, I'm going to talk really briefly about some of the major challenges that surround the provision of housing services, not so much the housing itself. We definitely know that there's a lack of housing in the first place, and what stock we do have is sometimes deteriorating. But I'm just going to talk about some of the more surrounding services around providing this housing. One of the things that we really need to recognize is that it's hard to get long-term qualified staff to run these types of programs. With baseline funding from government, our wages and benefits are stagnant. There's a lot of high turnover and burnout. We need constant training to keep up with all the best practices. And there's also an increased risk to worker safety when you're dealing with folks who have high acuity mental illness, addictions, or concurrent disorders. There's the challenge of public health and safety. Bed bugs are a terrible nuisance. People are hoarding. It's really difficult for a lot of landlords to keep up with the O&M without any funding going into the upkeep of these buildings. And there's also a really, really huge need for the people who live in these affordable housing units to have community connection and not just be housed. And probably the biggest challenge around providing affordable housing services is all the systems navigation that you have to go through to get a place to live. Tenants and their service providers have a lot of challenges trying to figure out all the different systems that are involved. There's literacy issues for people coming from outside of Canada, people with low literacy rates. There's lots of rude treatment right at the front desk when you go and get your services at Alberta Works or H or so on. Sometimes discriminatory treatment. There's a distinct lack of collaboration between many of these agencies. A lot of them, funding agencies who pay for people's housing don't actually connect with any of their health services or anything like that, so there's a lot of missteps and wrong types of crossover. So things like with income systems, H, Alberta Works, CPP, people really need to know a lot of stuff to get the funding to pay for their housing. The justice system doesn't always quite work. People are being discharged into homelessness. There are no readily available homes for high-risk offenders. Healthcare system, particularly around mental illness and addiction, is often inconsistent. You try to work with your agency and healthcare professionals, but often there's missteps there too. Especially when someone might lapse into illness and need to be hospitalized, they may lose their tenancy if they don't get their rent paid and so on and so forth. So really, in the housing services we provide, there's an evident lack of person-centered harm reduction and trauma-informed approaches. And these are things that really need to occur, especially with frontline government services and systems. That's my spiel, and thank you very much.
Daniel. We'll invite Lynn Hanley to come and talk a little bit about challenges related to community. We've touched on it a couple of times, and we'll see more of that.